Molly and Melanie are back with me now. So, Molly, is this the critical point as we close in on these last 2 weeks of this race, that Trump's vision and marketing does not represent all of America? Because it feels so tight right now. It's like, well, is it half?
Right. No, I mean, look, that's the anxiety. But I do think it's worth, when we talk about abortion for a minute, and again, we don't know what's going to happen in 2024. I'm not saying that we do, but every election since the overturning of Roe, abortion has ended up being a humongous issue. And I think it gets less attention because it's a quote unquote women's issue. But we're seeing more and more the effects of overturning Roe. We're seeing, pregnant women unable to get first trimester medical care in red states because of the overturning of Roe. And I think we're going to see that this is a much bigger issue than even than it's gotten the kind of attention it probably deserves.
So, Melanie, let's listen to some of what former President Obama told voters yesterday in Las Vegas. Here's that.
I get why people are looking to shake things up. It's understandable. I understand it. What I cannot understand is why anybody would think that Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that is good for you. Because there's absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself. He wants to sell you Word of God Donald Trump edition. He's got his name right there next to Matthew and Luke. And by the way, I'll give you one guess where those Bibles are made. In China. Yeah, this is Mr. Tough Guy on China, except when he can make a few bucks.
Michelle Obama will also be on the campaign trail next weekend. Is there any indication that the Obamas are helping Harris pick up new voters or perhaps unmotivated Democrats?
I mean, that is certainly the hope, right? You see why he is such a good orator on the trail, getting the crowd fire up, sticking to all the key talking points that Kamala Harris wants to be talking about. And, they're also going to be deploying Michelle Obama in the final stretch. I think she can be a real closer for them. And as we're seeing that key parts of the Democratic coalition have softened, or there's signs that some Black men are starting and Hispanic men are thinking about voting for Donald Trump, they feel like Barack Obama particularly can be a really strong messenger for that community. He is a powerful, important voice. Just one thing I would say, though, is I think there's this narrative out there that Black men could be responsible for giving Trump the presidency. But overwhelmingly, Black men are still going to vote for Kamala Harris and are still going to vote Democratic. It is a small slice of that population, but in a race where it is so razor thin and so tight, every vote matters. And so I think that's why you're seeing Kamala Harris put such an emphasis on this in the closing stretch here.
Not taking a single vote for granted. Molly, let's go back to abortion, because it is the number one motivating issue for voters in the latest NBC News poll. And Trump is obviously seeing similar numbers, hence his big pivot on abortion. Is there any indication that voters believe him on his changing position? Do you think it's going to win him any new voters?
So this is the big question with Donald Trump, is why he can get away with this sort of suspension of disbelief, where he'll say stuff and people will say, well, he's not really going to do that, or he really is pro-choice, despite the fact that he appointed the Supreme Court justices who did overturn Roe. And the answer is, I think abortion is a loser for him, and I think he knows it. And that's why he keeps trying to weave, but really weave, on abortion and say it's up to the states and say people were happy with the decision. I think he knows. I mean, he's seen the internal polling on this. And I think, look, he has a very large part of the base that is really only with him because of his anti-choice stance. So this is not an easy situation for him. He's really painted himself into a corner.
And Melanie, Harris has been hammering her economy and her abortion messages while Trump is, more or less meandered. In fact, here's how she put it. Listen to this.
When he does answer a question or speak at a rally, have you noticed he tends to go off script and ramble? And generally, for the life of him, cannot finish a thought. And he has called it the weave. But I think we here will call it nonsense.
And yet, they are still neck and neck. So is her message resonating?
Yeah, I mean, she's only really in recent weeks started to really talk about Donald Trump's character. I think because she had such a truncated campaign in the first few weeks, few months, she was really focused on introducing herself to voters, rolling out what she would do in terms of policy proposals, how she would handle a White House. And now she's finally talking about what a Trump White House would look like. And she's trying to frame it in terms of democracy being on the line, that he is unfit. It is such a close race, though. We'll have to see whether that messaging is working, but it is really fascinating, especially when you look at the advertising dollars being spent here in the final weeks, that they are increasingly talking about Donald Trump and what is at stake. And I think you're going to see more of that in the weeks ahead, Alex.
Okay. Melanie and Molly, it's good to see you both. I'll expect to see you again. We have 16 more days, so maybe 3 more appearances. Good works for me. Thanks, guys.